So in order to put our database together, we had a number of sources of information. There is a biography database. A couple of people, Peter and Ruth Wallace. Ruth Wallace might be in her 80s by now. But she and her husband, who died 10 years ago or so, went through all the books they could find, the British books they could find, and transcribed all of the subscription lists and put them in a database and extracted them various ways. Had about 5 publications. One of them listed mathematicians in the first half of the 18th century. It went through various lives. A couple of people bought them out, published the database. Then Ancestry.com bought the database, and you can now, if you have a subscription to Ancestry.com, you can get access to this particular database. There was a British fellow in the early 19th century who put together obituaries for everything you could find from various magazines. Musgrave's obituary, we looked at the alumni list for Oxford and Cambridge. We looked at, since there are a lot of peers, a lot of aristocrats on the list, looked at Collins' Peers of England. Isaac Newton was a good friend of Abraham de Moivre. Isaac Newton died in 1727. The book was published in 1730, so there's some question then as what influence did Newton have within de Moivre's knowledge community, since Newton was the scientist of the day. Went to the Royal Society. They have an online archive that lists all the fellows with biographical information of the fellows. Online dictionary of national biography. We looked at the History of Parliament Trust because we found in looking up a number of other people that a number of the people on the list were members of Parliament at one time or another. And since we now got into Parliament, there is a database on the web listing court offices and office holdings. So we entered all of this into a database designed by Mike and company, Mike and his friends, my initial thought was, well, I'm going to have a couple of guys, a couple of people working for me for the summer. We'll get this done. I'll publish the paper over the winter of the next year. It took 3 summers instead to get all of the data entered, and the paper is now finally written and submitted. When you look at the people in the database, there are some basic main groupings that come out. There are a number of aristocrats. There are a number of members of Parliament, fellows of the Royal Society. De Moivre was a fellow of the Royal Society, so he has friends within the Royal Society, and we can see a couple of groups of friends, or a couple of groups within the Royal Society who are interacting with de Moivre. There's individuals who have the title of professor. There are professors at Oxford and Cambridge, but there's also places like Gresham College, which was a college set up in London for public lectures. Those people also had the title of professor, different connotation. And there were professors at non-British universities. De Moivre was a Huguenot. He was a French refugee, left France after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes. So there are a number of Huguenots on the list. You can tell that there are a number of physicians on the list because they have MD, initials MD after their names. A number of people in looking up the Oxford and Cambridge alumni lists found a number of people went to universities, mostly Cambridge. And there are fellows at the university, people who held fellowships at universities, typically at Cambridge, and there are 5 libraries. So those are the main groupings. What we did to look at the data initially was to set up a Venn diagram Venn diagrams for more than 3 groups, unless you have separate groups, are kind of hard to set up. So this was done in a couple of ways. One was to look at the major groups of MPs, aristocrats, and fellows of the Royal Society. And professors, there are a few professors out there that aren't fellows of the Royal Society, again from foreign universities. There are people here who have M after their number. These are everything was numbered 1 to 163. M is a medical person, a physician. U went to a university, and H is a Huguenot. So you have to stare at the chart to look at all of this. And so what we want to do again is to find connections, commonalities. You notice that there are people who are aristocrats and MPs. Those would be, they were MP when they were a younger son waiting, or not a younger son, when they were the eldest son waiting to take over, waiting for daddy to die. There are a number of aristocrats who were involved in the Royal Society. Some were there for scientific reasons. They were definitely scientists. Others were there to support science.